welcome whoever is out there. I'm gonna sort of assume that because I don't know exactly who's watching this, my plan for today is to kind of do a session that can be revisited and you can kind of work on what I'm going to set in your own time. You can pause and take longer. So that's my kind of approach for today. But just to kick off, so I'm Jim. I've kindly been invited here today for a session for parents. Although, of course, if you stumble across this and you're not necessarily a parent, this still hopefully will give you something you can engage with in your own time. So I'm kind of a mixture of things. I'm a personal assistant to Marisa McKeith, who some of you may know, have seen her videos floating around this week. I'm quite honoured to be her assistant, to be quite honest with you. So I've been doing that since around 2011. I've learned an awful lot from being her PA. I'm also a writer, an educator, and I work a lot in schools, particularly with quite diverse groups. And my big thing really, which links me and all of my practices together, is on kind of building creative confidence and kind of carving out space to reflect on what matters to different people at different times in their life. So today's session is going to be quite simply an opportunity for you to come at this. You know, if you're a parent of a neurodiverse child or just a parent in general, you can kind of come at this from two ways really. So you might want to have a bit of space today just to focus on yourself and you know what matters to you at this moment, and have a bit of time to reflect with very many things happening in different times. You know, some things become more priority than others. Some things can also be at risk of getting lost in the flow. But of course, you might also want to come at this focusing on your child and what you think matters in terms of, for you, what you think is important about them, what they get, what you want to kind of give to them. But of course, the third element is it might be a mixture of both, right? Because it's not necessarily ever a case of being able to separate those two things. So if anyone is actually here, particularly in the Zoom setting, but also on Facebook, feel free just to pop quickly maybe your name and just kind of what brought you here today. For a bit of disclaimer here, I'm not able to check Facebook, but comments might be put through to me here. So yeah, you feel free to, if anyone's watching, just pop your name and what brought you here. It might be, you know, you were referred to it by a friend, you're interested in having a bit of space to reflect on what matters. Feel free to start putting that in the chat and I will get my assistant, as it were, to send that through to me. So to kick off with, I have to say, this is kind of an approach where you can respond however you'd like to. If you want to literally make notes and write your responses, that's fantastic. But you might just want to have a moment to reflect and think on the questions that I will be setting. There's no levels here, there's no judgment. You know, if you just want to write a couple of scribbles, or if you want to really expand on something and work on it after this session, that's fantastic. My belief is that, you know, you can write however you want to write, and at the same time you can respond however you want to respond, because some of these questions can seem simple, but actually when you sit with them, they're quite challenging to knuckle down and kind of figure out. Just to acknowledge Zakia, welcome. I'm here to reflect and support my son the best I can. Thank you so much for that. I'll try and get to as many as I can throughout the process. Thank you for being here. So to kick off with, before we really do anything nitty gritty, I guess, just maybe take a minute, no more than that, to sort of think about, just for this session, and you know, as you're watching this, if you know, how are you going to approach this time? Are you going to approach it, as I've said, where you want a bit of time for yourself as an individual to think about what matters to you in every sense? Or you kind of here really focusing on your child or children? You know, is it actually a space for you to really focus entirely on them? And as I said, I know that both can kind of come in and out of these things, but just in case you've not already thought about that, it might be worth deciding, you know, is it going to be a combination like Zakia again? I've just seen you've put a bit of both. That might be the case for everyone, to be honest, but there might be some people that think, actually, I'm really focusing on my child in this situation, or likewise, just on myself and my own kind of needs. So have a think about that just for a minute. What I'm going to do is, to make sure those timings work, I'll be doing it almost, you know, in my own space just for a minute, and then I'll move on to the next question. If you've already done that, then it's just a bit more time to reflect on, you know, when you're here, like, what do you actually think would be helpful in terms of getting time to think about those two sides as a parent and as a parent? What kind of things would be helpful to think about? So I'm going to like have about a minute doing this myself. Obviously, I'm not a parent, full disclosure, but my approach would be just giving you enough time to write or think about your responses. So just for another 30 seconds or so, and you can pause this video if you watch it at a later date, just to reflect on, yeah, what you're here for, what this time, which kind of angle you're going to approach it with. Cool. We will move on because I'm keen, just so you all know, I'll be finishing around 5:2 today because we've got a world record attempt happening after. So let's get straight to work, as it were. I want you to think about, at this moment in time, so literally today, as of now, at what, 10:36 a.m. I want you to try and list no more than 5 things that currently matter to you. So by that, it can be quite a big thing. It can be, I've got some examples here actually that I previously wrote. And again, it can be linked to yourself or your child, that my child feels heard in every space they're in. That's quite a big, significant one. Could be something that's a bit smaller potentially, that, again, this is if you're approaching it in terms of your child, that my child and I never forget to laugh. Can seem simple, but can often get lost. That we always make time for pizza nights on a Friday, even if there are like 1 million admin things to do in terms of support for my child, etc. And as I said, if it's more focused on you and as an individual, that I make space to think about what matters to me. So I just want you to start coming up with a list of 5 things that, as of now, really feel important to you and that matter. Please remember, there's no right or wrong. It can be as small as you think it is. It doesn't have to be anything that seems dramatic or remarkably a huge thing. It's about you and space for you to think about this. So you might struggle to come up with 5 right now. You might only come up with 1, which is more than okay. Having a cup of coffee for 5 minutes, it's all good. It's all valid. That's the beauty of this. So start having a think about, like, try to go no more than 5, and it might help to write them down. But again, you might want just to think about them and hold them in your head. I'll do the same again, just for like a little bit of time. Things that matter to you right now, and again, within that, I also can mean linked to your child, and you can put them in the chat, or you can just, write them to yourself now. There's never going to be any pressure to share. So just have another minute or 2 to think about that. Up to 5 things that currently matter to you that may or may not directly link to your child. Okay, if you're still working on that, that's fine. If you're done, that's also fine. The beauty of this is you can rewatch it, you can pause, take longer, take shorter. It's funny what comes up, because my approach of this obviously is just looking at right now me as a person. And one of mine was that I clean this fish tank, because to the right of me is my fish tank. So, things that matter can be very varied, is the lesson here. Again, if you at any point want to share anything, you can put it in the chat. But I'm aware some of this might be more personal to you, or feel like you need more time on it. So don't feel a pressure on that front. So when you've come up with, like you say, your list, even if it is in the end 1 thing right now, or 5 things that you feel very strongly about, the next thing I want you to do is to think about, again, nice simple question, not why these things matter right now. Again, can seem some of them maybe obvious, because it could be literally a matter of well-being, health, happiness. But yeah, why have you maybe either chosen deliberately, or why have these things jumped straight into your head when you're making your list? Again, the reasons for this can be very direct and almost straightforward. So it could be, again, just so that I can feel like I understand what my child is going through. That could be one. I don't know what you've written. That's the beauty of it. Or it could be more complicated, because without this thing, other things wouldn't feel right. It's difficult to know, isn't it, until you look back at your list. Is there a particular link to why you find some of these things matter? And of course, the beauty is you never know. When you're looking back at the list, you might actually have one and think, well, actually, this isn't actually as important as I thought it was. Maybe someone else is making that a thing. But for me, actually, the why of it, the kind of why this matters, it's not as important maybe to myself and my relationship with my child. So it can be almost lower down on my list. So that's a useful thing you might get out of doing this. So I'll do it as well. Just look at each thing and just have next to it a kind of why. So you've got the thing that matters, and then put this matters because, and then you can add a bit to it. Or again, you can just reflect on these things you have. So we're doing well. There's only one more bit after this. So I'll give you a good bit of time to kind of finalize a list of things that matter, and then a little accompanying why they matter to you personally. This isn't about anybody else. This is about your time. So I'll do the same. Okay, great. Got some from Zach here. Extremely challenging year. It's been an opportunity to reflect and focus on what's really important, what it is we need to be able to survive and be happy and content. Amazing. It's a whole poem almost from Zaki there. Expect nonetheless. Weirdly, mine was based on the fish tank thing. I had since in the links, right? You never quite know. Though I was joking a bit about it, my why for that was because even in lockdown, it matters to me that my home feels welcoming. And so I'm not saying it's all about cleanliness, but having a nice kind of fish tank is part of that. So yeah, you never quite know where this is going to take you. Maybe have a little bit of time to finish up with that. And again, please know if you struggle to get a complete clear answer, the beauty again and the challenge of this is it's not necessarily a straightforward task, because yeah, there might be lots of reasons why something should matter, but pinning it down is not always easy. So no pressure on that front. I want to go on to the next bit. Again, if you're still on the beginning bit, still even figuring out what brought you here, that's all fine. But just because of time, and I want to make sure that people that have done the first kind of couple of things are ready for the next bit. This is the hard bit, to be real, I think. I want you to look back at your list originally of what matters. Again, if you've only got one thing, now is a bit more of a time to expand it and maybe write or think more into that one thing. But if you've got more than one thing, try now, if possible, organizing your list as to what you actually think is the not exact order, but kind of order of priority to you and or your child and or anyone else you're associated with at this moment. So for example, my fish tank thing, I mean, on my list I've got a few other bits and bobs. The fish tank thing is a kind of more, it's not actually maybe as important as one other thing on my list, which was to keep doing this kind of work. And by this kind of work, I mean these kind of working with these kind of wonderful organizations. Shout out to Positively Empowered Kids. Being Maurice's PA, that's definitely above the fish tank thing, right? Not to disrespect my fish tank. So look back at your list and see if there's a chance you can maybe reorder, or even think of the one that at the moment is really a priority for you. Because as I was saying a lot about this kind of feeling of what matters, sometimes it feels like things should matter, but actually for your own relationship with yourself and your child, actually you know, there's one particular thing that is elevated above everything else, and it can be something as straightforward as closeness, happiness, you know, something like that is absolutely valid here. So yeah, have a look back at your list and see if you can either put down like the number one, or even by doing this, realize that everything on your list is equally important. You know, you can't take out one and then replace it with something else. They all hold just as much value. But if there is something that you find is a bit lower down and could be higher, that might be also interesting. So just for a couple more minutes, I'll do the same. Try and almost rank or think of which particular elements are the most important to you at this moment. Okay, hope we're going well. No rush to finish this. Got a nice comment from Zakia. Strong sense of own identity, positive role model for my child. That's huge, actually. That's amazing because it's so personal and based entirely on the individual, but it then affects and impacts the child or children you're interacting with as well. Love it. Thanks, Zakia, for that. And again, if you come across this video after the fact of it being live, as I say, the beauty is you can take much longer on these. You can actually take them away and, you know, work on them or think about them throughout a day rather than in, you know, a short space of time. Because I'm very conscious that these kind of questions are, you know, I've had time to think about them, but when you're thrown into a session and it's like, right, okay, how do I pin down all of this? It's not always as straightforward. So cool. I mean, you may or may not have managed to do that. You may have actually sort of found that quite challenging and said, well, ranking these things doesn't quite feel right for the sort of list I've got. But then you might also have at least realized that one might have particular resonance for right now. Which is in itself kind of really valuable. So, and we've got about just over 5-6 minutes left before I kind of wrap up today. A few things to say. First is, in an ideal world, not only would be in kind of this be in person, but would be kind of interacting a bit more. I kind of feed off hearing from people. So, you know, if you do end up watching this, you can still leave comments on the Facebook Live video link. Even if this is finished, that's still really helpful. I'll be going back and looking at them, and it will help inform, you know, my own practice and kind of ways around exploring this idea. I also want to say that the reason I suppose I came up with this session is to, in a way, I'm quite interested in carving out space for this kind of reflection time in an environment that you might be in where it's hard to do so because you're, I don't know, there's so many commitments that you have to do. And again, you know, I'm very open that I'm coming at this from a facilitator of creative writing workshops and working with a lot of different adults and young people, and definitely individuals, you know, on the neurodiverse kind of side of things, but I'm not a parent, so that's what's really interesting for me. I can't know those pressures, I can't know that experience, but I can know that you probably, and you know, not wanting to assume, but there's a lot that comes with that you kind of practically have to be doing a lot of the time. So the sort of the why of things and the what matters in that spectrum can get a bit blurred. And I just spotted a comment from Zakia. For my child, it's okay to ask for help. This will give him the confidence to share his needs. Yeah, that's a huge one. The asking for help side of things is, well, it can be pretty instrumental, I guess, from both sides. I'm interested in that, you know, from the parent and the child, of who asks for help and in what way and where you go to ask for help. So thanks, Zakia. Gotta give you so much credit for being here and commenting so actively. Yeah, so it was about carving out time, really. It was about, if you can have like a brief minute, and I say minute literally sometimes, to sit with these questions or just to refresh in your own mind, like, when you're committed to so many things, you know, is there at least some element to this that really is important? And maybe the things that aren't as important. And I have to admit, giving another shout out to Marisa, who I hopefully you'll watch the videos and get to know her through them. But she recently has been quite direct about things about cutting out some things that don't matter as much in the same way to make more room and more energy for the things that do. So I just thought, she again had that kind of inspiring element to all of this. So I've got a couple of things to end on, just to talk about sort of the work I do and opportunities maybe for potentially for your children to join in with my kind of workshops in the future. But before I do that, to kind of finish on, and again, if you're physically around, you can comment things here. But having done this now and having maybe at least created a list or one thing that you feel matters, just to end on, it'd be interesting to think about, is there anything that potentially used to matter to you? And let's think maybe here as a parent, and there could be millions of things, right? But is there something that mattered to you that maybe doesn't feel like it does in the same way anymore? And that's a weird question, but I like to end with a bit of a curveball. Got to keep challenging you all. Is there something that you felt once was really, really important to either your child or to you or to that relationship, that actually now, as time's gone on and you've kind of developed that relationship with them, maybe feels less important, or that there's less pressure for that thing to happen or for that to be a part of what you have now? And again, for examples, that can be, again, I'm not coming at it from a parent, but that could be something like I don't know, that it could even be something as quite big really as how other people perceive your child, or if they misunderstand certain elements of them. Is that something that you've worked through or worked around together and isn't as important, or is it still that same level of importance maybe to one or the other? Or things that you were almost asked to do, or assumptions that were made that you've felt that you had to do as a parent? Has anything like that changed and feels like it matters less now? And which I think is a strength, if you can go through that process of thinking that something should be important and actually realizing in the big scheme of things and what matters for you and your child, actually it doesn't necessarily matter in the same way. So I'm going to give you like 1 minute to think about that. I've already spotted Zaki has popped up a couple of things, but I'll give like a minute's time to really maybe think about that, and then I'll kind of end just with a couple of final thoughts. But it's flown by, and again, this has been already just to say, because I know time's going to go very quickly. It's a weird space, isn't it, doing these? But I think hopefully if you watch this even a month's time in, you can still take something from it. So yeah, let's just have a minute to think about that. Anything that's changed that matters almost less now. Okay, I'm gonna have a look and see what Zaki has got. Quite a couple of bits coming in. Zaki, I was so focused on my child achieving academically, we lost our way on actually putting our energy into our relationship. Element of mum guilt. Wow. Recently took a step back, still focusing on his learning, but not as intense. And this has had a huge impact on our relationship, and it feels great. I don't know if I can do it here, but Zoom sometimes has those thumbs up symbols. I would definitely give you a thumbs up symbol for that. Yeah, that's huge, Zaki. Thanks so much for sharing that. It's been great. I'm looking forward to revisiting this when I journal next. Interesting to get kids doing it too. Yeah. Journaling is an interesting one. I think this kind of activity is very like journal friendly. It kind of lends itself to just not a finished polished piece of writing that you might ever share, but kind of a couple of lines every day or every week even about this, like checking in with what matters and checking in with kind of, and yeah, Zach is popped up here, and I know that you've put this as well, that this thing of doing it with doing it with your child. That is actually amazing, because that's a lot of what I do when I work with young people. It's almost straight away before I've even said anything and spieled my thoughts, just straight in say like what actually matters to you right now. And that can be really like interesting, because it isn't maybe what you expect sometimes, and that can be kind of useful. Yeah, I'll definitely be doing this with my kids. I'm glad to hear about Zakia. Blake, now hopefully it might not be, this could be the one and only Blake, who is quite a phenomenal person and someone I know very well. Blake saying it's important to have some reflection. Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. And on that note, Blake, you've closed the show. Blake Williamson is the one himself. It's the man himself. Very good friend of Marisa McKeith. Wonderful wordsmith. Massive, a lot of respect for anything Blake has to offer. So yeah, important to have reflection. I agree completely, and that's a really nice way to round off. It's about just coming up to 4 minutes too. So I'm going to just end by saying I do run Nottingham Young Writers workshops for young people every kind of month on a Saturday virtually. The links I'll get posted somewhere on the Positively Empowered Kids page. They are for ages 9 up to 17. So if they're interested, your child might be interested to come along. I'm sure you can contact the organisers and sort that out. I'm going to leave it there personally because I'm aware there's a world record attempt happening. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm done. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the organisers. It's been a pleasure, and keep writing, keep thinking, keep reflecting. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.